Hello, welcome to Fathoms Deep, a Common Room radio production. I'm Liz Stevens.
And I'm Daphne Olive.
All right, so this is our first episode, which means we're going to be trying to feel things out a little bit about how we want to structure this thing to make it easier for our listeners to follow along. So we're going to try and break our show up into 3 blocks. The first block, we're going to just go over a brief synopsis of the episode to kind of do a little refresher course and remind everybody what happens beat by beat. And after that, we're going into our second portion, which is prepare to board. And we're going to really talk some more about the character development that we saw and get into some of the deeper consequences of the episode. And from then, we're going into our real deep dive, Give Us the Room. And we'll talk about the big overarching themes and what we think our storytellers are really trying to get at, and what
the larger philosophical questions that they're addressing. And usually we're going to focus on ones that we know are going to have meaning throughout the whole series as we've seen up until now. We won't spoil, but we will bring those up, and so that we can all use those as food for thought while we're watching the rest of the series.
So let's get started and remember a little bit about episode 1, which starts out telling us we're in 1715 and that our pirates are enemies of humanity and they're in war against the world. So we jump right into the action where we have a captain looking through his glass, seeing the pirate flag flying. We don't know whose, but he obviously does, and sets it down. And there's this very specific notion that he knows who's coming, he knows what's ahead, and the whole crew does too. And before long, there are all these whispers that that's Captain Flint's flag, that we're all going to die. And then we get our introduction to our first main character, who is
John Silver.
John Silver. That's before he's Long John, when he's just smarmy, cowardly, hiding below decks Silver. Yeah, and it's awesome to see him at this point because we come to know him so much better in later seasons.
Okay, so the first stage of this episode is Flint, although we don't know it's Flint to begin with, but we see pirates boarding a merchant ship.
Right.
The first thing we see is the pirate flag, so that kind of gives us the context for exactly what's happening.
Yes.
And we see how it happens, and we have in the first part them taking the ship, and we get introductions to a few of our characters through that conflict.
Right.
And that is the first section of the episode. The second section is when they go to Nassau.
Right.
And we learn about our characters that are the characters that exist in Nassau, in that world, and what Nassau is about. And then and
what it means to these pirates.
Right. What is the relationship of Nassau to the pirate ships?
Right.
And the people there. And then in the third section, we go back to Flint's ship, and we see what happens in the power struggle that's happening within the world of those pirates.
Right, on that specific ship. Yeah, on the Walrus, which is Flint's ship. That's
exactly.
Right.
So we can get into now, I think, each character and what it means and what they're doing. But that's the general structure of this episode, which kind of gives us all of what we need to know about this world. We see what pirates do. We see what their relationship is to the community at Nassau. And then we see a lot about how the power dynamics happen within the crew of a specific pirate ship.
That's right. And it's really ambitious because there's a lot of characters that we get in this first episode, which I have to admit I didn't notice initially because I was just so along for the ride. But it has been, I wouldn't necessarily call it a criticism that I've heard lifted up, but some people did say they're throwing a lot of people and a lot of politics at you at once, and there is a lot to absorb.
That's true. And for me, I was just saying that the thing that sold the show to me was how much politics there was in this first episode, that you just are watching really smart people use their intelligence to maneuver, and there's already so much shifting of the ground even in the first episode. There are a lot of characters. I felt like I had a grip the first time I saw it. Well enough, not necessarily on who exactly is who all of the time. The most primary characters, it was clear, but the message you're getting throughout the whole thing is how tenuous everyone's situation is and how they're really living by their wits every minute.
Prepare to board.
Aye.
So our first character that's going to be a big star player that we really meet is John Silver. First impressions, Daphne?
First impressions of John Silver. He's clever, and he is a coward.
He's he's smarmy and slippery.
Right, and he is so clear on that. That is exactly.
There's no shame at all. He
whatsoever.
absolutely embraces it. He's such a Slytherin, I like to say. He's very ambitious, and he'll do whatever he can to just
completely self-serving.
Yes,
unabashedly
absolutely self-serving,
so.
And he has no allies at all. And you see it, there are a couple of times throughout the episode where he tries to make allies clumsily, I might add, and they're having none of it. Like, I don't trust you yet.
Right.
Give us some time and maybe we'll see. But he starts right out a liar, a coward, a thief, right from the beginning. And there's nothing to like about him.
Completely embracing all of that.
Absolutely he is. And it's interesting. We also see, because of course we know from the story of Treasure Island that Long John Silver is the ship's cook.
Right.
But he's not yet. They immediately kind of serve that up to us as to how that happened, where we get his interaction with this guy who is stealing the page, which you and I had discussed. He's got to have his own story, right? There's no way just the actual ship's cook knows about this agenda and is going through to find the agenda for the Urca de Lima. He's got to be
either he has a good backstory or they didn't actually
or they
do a
didn't
great
think
job.
about it. Alternatively, they were just
two
like,
ways this could go.
Plot device, he won't matter. No one's going to talk about this later. Indeed.
Right. So I am actually now leaning towards them not actually putting that much thought into why someone, I mean, maybe he's the cook, maybe he's not, but yeah, why does this random person know exactly where this important piece of paper is to rip it out? The thing that I love about Silver is that we start to see how quick he is on his feet. Like he notices immediately that thing is something important. He doesn't know what it is. He doesn't care. He knows it's important. He knows that this might have some sort of leverage for him.
Yeah. And I think that's because he really understands people. He doesn't always understand circumstances or situations. In fact, we see much later on in the show where he really does come up against situations and he has no idea how to work his way through them, but he can work his way through people. So that is going to be what he's going to choose to do. But I loved your note as we were watching that everything that he finds out about the situation, he finds from reading this other guy, not from what is actually physically happening in front of him, but he sees this thing is important to you. How can I twist this around and make it work for me? And he even knows, like, I'm sure Captain Flint would be interested to see that you're hiding something from him. So not only is he reading this cook guy, but he's also anticipating the needs of Captain Flint and how to get him into his corner or to ingratiate himself with him.
He's definitely a person that you can tell from the very first minute you meet him that he is quick-witted. He's just his mind is working fast, and he will grasp. And what is it that he says to Max later on? He says, "I see an opportunity, and I have to take it. It's kind of a sickness."
Yes, it's kind of a sickness. Absolutely.
All right, I think we can move on to Flint.
Flint is a big topic. And what we get before we get Flint is we get the foreshadowing of the fright that the name Captain Flint brings. Before we actually get the person of Flint, we get this idea that everyone on this ship knows that the banner that is flying is Flint's banner. They know that as soon as he boards, they're all dead.
That's so
isn't
true.
there somebody
Like,
who says
totally
Flint will kill us all?
Right.
Yeah.
He is a character before we even actually see him. And
absolutely.
Then we have the confusion about who he is, which I love.
And I'm glad that you brought that up because I missed that. So why don't you walk us through that with your first viewing?
Okay, so we have this whole, kind of building of fear.
Yes.
Which we're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but we have this kind of beautiful ratcheting up of fear that you see the flag and then there's the fighting, but then there are the people who have locked themselves inside of a room on the ship, and you hear stomping and screaming and all of this stuff
And the
just
yelling.
right. And then they come in and you see one main guy is just clearly so fierce. He's just killing people right and left.
Hacking people up with an axe,
Right.
basically like a battle axe.
Yep.
Old school.
And when I first watched it, I was positive that was Flint. I was so sure
so
that
interesting.
guy had to be Flint because
Yeah.
we have built up all this fear already in such a short time of who Flint is. And then right when he's about to go for the captain of the merchant ship, somebody else stops him.
That's right. His actual sword is blocked by another sword.
Yep.
And we hear the voice that says, enough.
He says, it's done. Wouldn't you agree? But he says that to the other captain.
To the captain.
And so
yeah.
right in that moment, everything I thought, I mean, I guess this isn't everyone, but everything I thought up until that moment about the person we will learn is Singleton, that I thought he was Flint, got completely inverted because then Flint unmasks himself.
Yes.
Which is so
Literally.
dramatic. Yep.
Yeah. Well,
He unmasks himself. He turns to the other captain and speaks to the captain and immediately just pushes Singleton down to a subordinate level.
Yes.
And,
wow.
and I think that, we will be talking a lot about Captain Flint.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say.
But I just felt like that was, in many ways, the perfect introduction of him.
I think you're right.
He is a force of nature. And this will not be the first time where we see him just take someone who's physically larger and seemingly more fierce than him and just stop them in their tracks.
So then it's our first time. I feel like we have to mention since our first episode that this is the first time we get that amazing opening sequence with the great Bear McCreary music that is amazing and pitch perfect and spot on. And these just incredible graphics of the
sculpture. What are we going to call it?
That are cast in. I mean, it looks to be cast in marble or ivory, and then in bronze. I think in like the black metal that's against. It's just the coolest opening, and I mean, it really shows you what you're in for. And there's so much of this like pirate life and the different things that you come across in the show that are right there.
And also, like, there are the buildings that are actually like going over in the waves, like being washed away.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Very, very thoughtful. You can tell that there was a big team behind that who was working hard to make sure that they did something amazing, and they sure did. So after that amazing opening sequence, we get another great piece of visual storytelling, which is the camera comes up on these sharks underwater, just very predatorial, very
ominous.
Ominous and menacing and just primal, I guess. And then we pull up from that and we've got these two ships and we've got all of our pirates on board. And I love this idea of just like the sharks and the ships and the pirates and it just being this very primal way of life. Or so it seems to be, at least at first to us. And that's the first time we meet Gates. And we see that these pirates who have just boarded this ship, who are, that we have seen as monsters that are to be feared, are just guys on a workaday job, which is an amazing.
They're just unpacking stuff now.
Yeah. Gates is walking around like, what do we got? What's in here? Looking for the good stuff, and some of our most horrifying pirates that have come out just hacking and screaming and just an aboriginal costume are taking their teeth out and yelling boo, and it's just fascinating how it just kind of dismantles. It's another unmasking, I think. And that's when Gates meets Silver, and we have the two of them together for the first time. And we realize, I think, how not like Silver Gates is, because it doesn't occur to him to ask any questions to Silver at this point. Silver says, I happen to be a very good cook. And Gates takes him at his word, which seems kind of astonishing given the situation.
Oh, that's true. I had not thought about that. Okay, we're going to have to think about what that means for Gates long term.
Yeah, because we're about to have him have a conversation with Singleton, and that's where we're going to learn that he is quartermaster. And as quartermaster, he is supposed to be keeping the interests of the crew at the forefront.
Yeah, he's like a check on the captain.
Yes, a check on the captain. That's exactly right.
He's the intermediary between the interest of the crew and representing that to the captain.
Right.
Which is, we'll talk about that more also in a little bit. but it's a fascinating political structure that happens on the ships.
It is, yeah. And as such, you would think in this situation, especially as he's going through and he's, finding out how much they took, what's going to go around, that this is the time to ask questions of any surviving people that are on board. But Silver basically says, I'd very much like to join your crew. I'm a good cook. And Gates says, okay, sure, kid.
Well, and we also find out that they actually totally need a cook.
That, and that's fair. Yeah,
right.
I'm sure, he probably said the exact right thing in that situation. Yeah. Had he said anything else, that's a really good point.
Well, and we learn afterwards that he is actually, this is also part of a different political struggle, that he is the only recruit that they end up taking.
That is right.
Because they do need a cook.
Because they need a cook so bad.
They absolutely need a cook. The thing, I think we can get to the discussion that he has with Singleton.
Yeah.
I thought, that was just really interesting because gave us insight into what a quartermaster is.
Yes.
But also gave us insight into what is going on with this crew.
Yeah. And how their political structure is a little bit broken.
Right. So Singleton, we have this wonderful introduction with Singleton talking to the recruits and
giving really a pretty rousing and stirring speech.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's also interesting right after we saw how Flint essentially undermined him.
Yes.
So we see him, giving this really great speech to the people that he wants to recruit. But then what's more interesting in terms of Gates is that Gates sees right through this.
Yes.
Gates understands immediately.
He sure does.
That Singleton is trying to get votes. So he brings it up. So we already understand that there's some sort of conflict going on between Singleton and Flint. And also Singleton calls Gates out, saying, you're not representing the crew the way you should. You are in Flint's pocket.
Right.
And so we understand immediately that is not appropriate for a quartermaster. That is not, that's not what a quartermaster is supposed to be doing. And he's essentially saying to Gates, you're not doing your job. And when I'm captain someday, are you going to not do your job for my benefit as well?
Yeah.
The other thing that you see in a really subtle way is that you see Gates right before that, he's talking to Singleton, and then Flint comes up, and Singleton's being really hostile, kind of passive-aggressive hostile towards Flint.
Yes.
And that's the first moment, and this is one of my favorite things about Gates throughout, is that you see he manages people really well.
Gates does. He's a brilliant quartermaster because of that, because he does. He's a peacekeeper in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm.
And he's really subtle about it. And he just, there are moments throughout this episode and throughout in general that you see Gates just subtly divert someone's attention to keep conflict from happening.
Yep.
And that was just a beautiful moment of that. I just love how graciously he manages to pull people away from each other that need to be away from each other, push people together that need to be together. Mm-hmm. He's very subtle, and that'll be, in contrast to the way other characters manage people.
Yes.
He's not really controlling people. He's managing
them.
them.
It's true. He's not in the least controlling. He's not devious in the way that Silver is. He doesn't use people for his agendas the way that Flint does. He
serves other people.
He is and in that way he is an excellent quartermaster. And I believe that he is representing the interests of the crew as well as being loyal to Flint, because he believes in Flint.
Right.
He truly does believe that Flint is the best captain for this crew, and that's why he puts so much behind it. And that's why he has that wonderful conversation with Flint about why he needs to be honest with the crew about what it is that they are doing.
Absolutely.
And Flint has no trust for these men.
No.
Because, and we don't know why yet, although we get some more, even in this episode, the idea that there's a different backstory for Captain Flint than for the rest of them. But he has no trust for these men, whereas I feel that Gates does. Gates
absolutely. Gates is an old school pirate.
He is,
I think, and we can discuss more what that means. But
and I think this is a good time because we just talked about Singleton's speech that he gives, and when he's talking about how the real enemy here is the tyrant captain.
Right.
Many of us worked ships just like this before, and we chose to make a new and a different life for ourselves, where we don't rely on wages. And where our pleasures aren't a sin, but a virtue.
Right.
So it's a very interesting idea about how like these people were not born into piracy. This is a choice that they have made. And granted, I feel like most of them, their choices weren't super great at this time. Like like there's not a lot of options that are available to you. But I mean, it was a hard life on a ship. And it seems to me that in these merchant ships, it's absolutely true. Like what the captain says absolutely goes. So I wonder if they also had the same kind of hierarchy with quartermasters and with bosuns and all of that on the merchant ships. Do you know?
Oh, I don't actually. I mean, a bosun is something that is a ship term. That I know.
Right.
Quartermaster, wow, we'll have to look into that. I'm going to guess that actually it probably did, but, and this is one of our larger themes about this, is merchant ships obviously didn't have a democracy.
Yeah.
There was a captain.
Yeah,
the captain,
it's clearly
the
very
captain
different.
was chosen by whoever owned the merchant ship.
Ah,
so
okay.
so the hierarchy was stable. So whether or not there was a quartermaster filling that role may be like a representative for the crew, but that representative wouldn't have the same kind of power because there was never a danger of the crew voting a captain off.
Yeah,
and this is one of the
I
big
suppose
things.
so.
This is one of the this is one of the big story points here. I mean, that's pretty much what frames this episode is the idea of future election to replace Flint, and then we go through all the steps of what happens with that.
And I think our next introduction, or at least our next big introduction to a main character, is going to be Billy Bones, who is the guy who gets the ball rolling in the story in Treasure Island.
Right.
So he's the first guy that we meet who has, of course, so much fear built up from this shadow of over his life of Captain Flint and the one-legged man, this one-legged pirate. So we already know, having any kind of pop culture osmosis, that Billy Bones lives in fear of Flint and Silver and that he is the first mate of Flint. But at this point, he is not that thing at all. We've got this poor, well, I won't even call it, but we've got a very young, very idealistic bosun, which is, what's a bosun?
A bosun is the person who's in charge of what happens on the deck. Is in charge of in charge of like what the crew does and assigning jobs, I believe. And
it's up there for sure. It's an important position.
Absolutely. I would
he's working his way
I would
up.
say it's essentially the third in command. Like
that makes sense,
right?
Yeah, he's no just
and he's
he's
a relatively new bosun because we do find out that Randall,
yes, that's right,
was the bosun.
So that's a good point. So he is just now beginning his climb up the ranks,
exactly,
and he's still very. I mean, if there is a pirate in the show who's wide-eyed and innocent, it's our Billy Bones.
It is so Billy.
It is.
And we learn a few things about it. We learn that the people really like him.
Yes.
It's so clear the way every single person interacts with him, that they like him. Not just respect him, that they like him. And I think that's a big deal. Mm-hmm. And especially Gates.
Yes.
It's very clear early on that
I love the relationship with him and Gates. Yeah. That Gates has taken Billy under his wing, it seems like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we just get a glimpse of that here, and we'll see more of that relationship as time goes on.
And you were saying you think that Billy is probably the audience surrogate?
I'm pretty positive at this point. Yeah.
Because I definitely relate to Billy the most, but it's so personal to me because I am an idealist and I see everything. I filter it through my value system first, sometimes before I see the truth of the matter. And sometimes my ideals and my value system cloud my judgment. So I recognize Billy and so he's very dear to me.
Right. And I feel like he is, I don't want to say like that I'm not an idealistic person.
No, that's okay.
I know I am very much an idealistic person, but I'm not a Billy. But I think it's pretty clear because something that when I started to rewatch at the end after season 3, I'm not going to say anything spoil why I did this, but I decided to go back and really focus on how Billy reacts to things.
That's good.
And I really do believe this. I think because Billy is kind of the least piratey in a way, that also
definitely
makes him the surrogate for us. Like he is the person we can most relate to. He just comes across as a guy like reacting to what's going on around him.
That's good. Well, and asking questions about what's going on around him and wondering why he's making the decisions that he's making.
Right.
Like so many, it seems like, well, I'm just signed on. This is my life. This is what I do every day. Obey orders. Aye, Captain.
Right.
And you don't see that in Billy. Billy is trying to decide, it seems to me, what is right and what is most just. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's constantly trying to figure out what is the right thing to do. And,
Yes.
And he is also, I think, the character that goes through an actual arc in this one episode.
Yeah,
Billy
that's a good
goes
point.
from
Billy
the
has
person-
the biggest arc.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So-
well, I don't know. Flint has a kind of an arc here too,
Okay.
so it's hard to say. But yes,
Okay, Billy's the one who goes through the most personal transformation. Let's
yes,
say that.
Yes.
That
Okay.
he's-
Yeah.
that
That's absolutely fair.
He starts out as like, yeah, he has responsibilities and whatever, but Gates basically hands him a huge responsibility, the responsibility
Yeah.
of managing Flint,
Which is insane.
which
yeah.
Billy is not really prepared for.
Well, and it's so funny because it's so in contrast with the conversation he has with Silver when he first meets Silver and he's introducing him to Randall and telling him he's the cook. And he gives him the speech of how things work on the ship.
Right.
And he says, we are all equals here. You don't give any special treatment, no extra food to anybody, not to me, not to the captain. We're all equals. And he says it, believing it.
Yep.
And yet, the moment Gates says, okay, you need to, what's he say? To restrain the
He says,
captain?
"You
And
need
he
to restrain the
Flint. He's like, restrain him? Are you kidding me? He's like, he doesn't even listen to me.
Right.
So even though it's like he has, he believes in this ideal, in the democracy, but when the rubber actually meets the road, we see that he doesn't quite, that he doubts it, actually, that he really does know his place.
That's totally true. And that is also okay. We're going to move part of that conversation to a little bit later.
We'll have to do that.
Because especially as the surrogate and especially as the true believer,
Yes.
what he ends up doing at the end is really significant.
You're right.
All right. So now we're going to move on to our Nassau characters, and we will start with Max. Yes?
That's right. We meet Max first.
Right.
You're absolutely right. We do. In a sequence that is not great, in my opinion.
Mine also.
Okay,
We are not fans,
Not
of,
fans.
of the quote unquote Blackbeard scene.
The Blackbeard scene is just cheap, was the word we said.
Yeah. I mean, it's pandering.
It's pandering.
It is
That's a great
pandering.
word. It was pandering to what they believed their audience to be.
Right. And
It is my hope that we are showing them that that is not, in fact, their audience.
I think they learned their
they
lesson.
seem to have learned. Yeah, they because it's really remarkable how different the show is in season 3 than here in these first episodes in season 1.
Right.
Yeah.
Or even later in season 1 and
even
in
later.
season 2.
Yeah.
So this, I mean, I feel like this scene actually is pretty much a standalone scene that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense
From a narrative standpoint.
Right. And so, that was the thing I brought up, is that I see no reason whatsoever why anyone on the crew of the ship, of the Walrus, would take this new recruit that they don't have any particular feelings for and treat him to not just one prostitute, but 5. That's
5 at once.
Got to be quite a bit of money.
Well, and at first I was like, oh, it's this joke. It's like a hazing because he's supposed to be so scared of Blackbeard. And that works. Like the hazing
that totally
part,
works.
Up until you're paying for 5 prostitutes for this guy when we all know you're all broke as a joke.
Right.
And you're lucky to get your 1.
Exactly. Right. We just learned that they had 4 halls with almost no profit.
That's right.
So there's no reason why they would do this. And but it is what it is.
I also think, for me personally, it also takes some of the respect and some of the reverence that should be due to the name of Blackbeard when we actually are introduced to him as a character later.
Right.
And you think, this is too soon. These people wouldn't be throwing this name around like this for a joke.
Right. Okay.
In my opinion. I could be wrong.
No, I think you're completely right. I mean, it does, I guess, for anyone who doesn't know there's a name, that there is a historic pirate named Blackbeard.
And I wonder if they knew they were going to bring him onto the show yet, because he doesn't show up until, is it 3?
Right.
I think 3.
And we're not spoiling anything important by saying that. He does
Just the
show up,
character
and
who
it's
comes.
awesome, and we love him.
Mm-hmm. But it's just
gonna be
because in our brain, the Blackbeard
Right.
is the prostitute. It's kind of,
Right.
it's just a surprise, and you have to kind of work around it for a moment.
But the one thing that comes out of this scene, which is spectacular,
It
is what happens after, when we see just Max and Silver in the room, and we learn immediately that these two are equals. That Max is fast on her feet,
Yep.
thinking quickly, and completely mirrored. That we saw Silver understand when the quote unquote cook was scrambling for whatever that thing is that we still don't know what it is.
Right. The piece of paper,
right,
the page. He's just going at the page.
So Silver immediately understood that thing was important and valuable, and Max did the exact same thing.
Exactly.
That she, saw that this man who just chock-a-block prostitutes is only concerned with this random piece of paper on the
that he keeps
floor.
glancing back to. Yeah, and she's like, that's important.
Right, and she's the same way. She does the exact same thing. She says, this is important and valuable.
Yeah, and this is why I am valuable to you.
Right.
Yeah.
I want in on this, whatever it is. And neither of them know what it is.
Which is hysterical. Yeah, yeah. They have no idea what they're dealing with, but they know that they can benefit from it, and they're going to do whatever they can. They're going to risk quite a lot to try to get that benefit.
Well, and because neither of them is in a position of power. They are both, they've got nothing right now except the fact that they're smart and they're scrappy.
Yep.
And
I like it.
Yep. And that is another thing that we will find that those two have in common. And I love these two characters because they are so smart. And I know that's a little jumping the gun with Silver because a lot of people don't like him in the beginning.
He's not likable in the beginning, and that's totally fair. I immediately liked Max and respected Max, more so because when we were first introduced to some of our other female characters, I did not. Not that I didn't like them, but I didn't understand them. They weren't well developed yet. Whereas Max comes off the page, and you absolutely
totally true.
You know who she is.
You want to know
her. Yeah,
you want to know where she's going.
Yeah, you want to see her succeed, which is very interesting.
Yep.
Because there's no reason to know even why. Even more than you want to see Silver succeed, you just have this idea that this is a woman who is who is smart and who is competent and who is going to make a name for herself. She's going to make something of her situation.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, then we can contrast that with Eleanor.
Let's do that. Okay. So, so we follow this already kind of a scene that's a bit of a groaner for me, that I have to kind of get through. And
I think, for me also, I have to say first, and then, but I do think there are people who enjoy this scene. I think in our social group, this is not a popular scene. I have a feeling that this is also a scene that plays to men more than to women. She is in this model of like the tough, badass woman,
right?
That that it is a thing that I think some people like.
Well, I just wish it had been done with a little more elegance. Maybe it's
absolutely.
A very inelegant scene,
right?
And it's hard for me to understand who Eleanor Guthrie is because she comes out swinging, but mostly, literally, But her speech is very low. Like it's peppered with, the F word all the time, and it's lowbrow, I guess is what I'm saying. But she comes from society,
right?
So it's possible that they're trying to say something about how she's rejecting her place in society, but I don't think that is true of her character because she's trying to make what she wants this island to be. Right. And as we get to learn more about her, what she's trying to build here is something respectable and something that stands alone. And because of that, this attitude that she has affected, this personality that she has scrapped, I feel like that she has, like, this isn't the way that she was raised. So she has decided to take on this personality, and instead of mirroring what her mother and her father showed her as they ran this business and ran the island, really, that she's going to parrot back, so to speak, pirate joke, what these pirates are talking to her. Like, she's going to say, I am one of you. But that works against her. So why would she do it?
Well, I do believe that I believe that she makes bad choices, but I do think that her purpose is that she's overcompensating.
Okay. Walk me through that.
She knows that, and Scott makes this clear very soon. Vane makes this clear also. Like, this is something that we hear a few times in this episode that she's not actually the person with the authority.
Right.
It's actually her father, who we also learn in this episode is on a different island.
And been there for like 5 years,
right? He's not there. So she's been basically left with this half authority that she has.
Yeah.
And she's chosen this crass, really like almost like caricature of toughness.
Yes.
As a way to to show this authority. And right, I don't think it's a smart tactic.
It doesn't seem to be working the way she wants it to. It works with all of the the scrubs, like the swab the next guys.
Right.
Yeah, it totally works for them.
People find it like amusing and satisfying, perhaps on a not comical, but like
are you talking about the audience or the pirates?
The pirates.
Okay.
I think the pirates are finding it, they're like, look at her, she's being badass. But I don't feel like she's getting the actual respect. And so it ends up being an absurd way to go.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's pretty clear, I think, that the pirates, that there is no real respect for Eleanor Guthrie, but she is a necessary evil.
Right.
Like they have to have, she sells the goods, so you have to deal with Guthrie. That's just part of how it works. But we see really quickly that Vane is completely unmoved. That
by her tough act,
right? Exactly. Well, yes. But like it's really only the lowest of these pirates that are intimidated at all by this act, if they even are. Well, it's just hard to see.
Now that I'm thinking about it more, like your idea of parroting, like she's not just parroting like the common pirate. Think what she's trying to do. Like if we can, I guess we'll bring Vane in now into the discussion. Like,
because when you see her, we get Vane right after this. So sure,
you see her conversation with Vane, which is not when we're introduced to Vane, but a little bit afterwards.
You're right. It is a little.
But our introduction to Vane is like he's silent, he's smoking a cigar. There is no question that this man is in charge of things.
Like his authority comes before him.
His people do his dirty work for him.
Yeah,
and he's just standing there, and he, it's like Flint.
Yes, quite.
He's not like Flint, but it's the same kind of introduction of just like, my presence is enough for you to understand who I am.
Yes.
So, but then we see the scene with him and Eleanor, and he's kind of in my eyes, heartbreaking combination of being tough and being tender to her.
Yes. Yeah. Well, when we first see them together, Eleanor walks up, punches him in the face.
Yep.
And he punches her right back.
Right. And which is a perfect illustration of her trying to be tough and not being smart.
It is. Well, and it's also this perfect illustration of this is what you are portraying to us, is that you are one of us. And if you are one of us, we will treat you as one of us. And so it was this very interesting, difficult scene.
It's an uncomfortable scene.
It's an uncomfortable scene. It absolutely is. And then he goes into her, and that's a part of his act also, is like, you can't do this in front of my crew.
Exactly.
What is this actually about?
Right.
What are we fighting about?
And what he's projecting in that scene with Eleanor when they're behind closed doors is a quiet strength.
Yes.
Because he actually has the strength to back it up. And so what I'm saying is that she's actually trying to look like that, in contrast to his really quiet authority, which we can completely understand is based in actual authority that he has.
Right. And that he has spent years gaining.
Absolutely. She is kind of, doing this approximation of it, but she's doing it poorly. And I don't know. I have a little bit of sympathy for her here because I feel her struggling. I feel her like trying really hard and making a bit of a fool of herself.
Yeah.
Trying to pretend to be like these pirate captains. And again,
that helps me.
Yeah, she has some authority because of her father, but again, it's not
because she's a necessary evil,
right? But it's not hers. So she's a little bit flailing around. I think flailing around actually is. Now that I said it, I feel like that's a really good description of what she's doing because she's very uneven.
That's why she is so quick to agree to Gates when he comes in and asks for the $1,000 to get Flint's captaincy, because not only does she want the same things that Flint wants. And Vane says something too about how you're clinging to the legend of who Flint is and of what this place was.
Right.
And that's not here anymore. If there's any future for this place, I'm the future of this place. Which is just to say that times are changing and she's holding on to an old way of life. But I wonder if because when Gates comes in, he comes to her and she thinks, here's someone who sees me as having the authority to do this thing. If that isn't something that kind of tips the scales in his favor to make her make this not so great decision, even when Mr. Scott is trying to nudge her in the opposite direction. Because what does he say? Your father wouldn't agree to this. And she's like, well, my father's not here, is he?
Right. And that's an interesting take on it. I mean, I do believe that she has a bit of an irrational following of Flint, at least at this stage. Like, he's going to give her reasons to follow him.
He does. See, and that's and I wonder if that's part of the storytelling or if they just didn't know yet. Like, I want to give the writers all the benefit of the doubt because there's so much great stuff that they do and so much foreshadowing that we have, even in season 1, of things that there's no payoff for, 12, 15 episodes.
Right.
But this is one that's hard for me. And
I think this will be explained, and we'll have to address that in future episodes because aspects of her relationship with Flint will be exposed over time.
It takes me a long time. I remember that it took a lot of scenes with Eleanor and Flint before I had any understanding of what their relationship was. And I was always second guessing myself.
I'm not sure if she understands what their relationship is, and that's part of her problem.
That's a good point.
But I think right now what we know is that she is possibly making decisions that are counter to her interests. I mean, she makes it very clear in that first scene that we don't love that she's willing to be nice to someone who's mean to her if he's an earner.
Right, yeah.
And we know that Flint used to be a great earner. We know from the storyline on his own ship that he has not been for a while.
Right.
His crew's unhappy to him. We know now, like Scott even says, you're a necessary evil, but when you're weak, you are no longer necessary.
Yeah.
And yet she props him up. So we are seeing from the first episode that Eleanor is drawn to Flint, and perhaps because Vane is scary to her now, perhaps because she thinks that Flint could prop her up also.
Right.
Perhaps for totally irrational reason. We just don't know yet. We don't know. But what we do know is that Eleanor has gone against what is the smart business decision for Flint. That's what we know so far.
That is true.
Again, it's not helping her characterization because she's really seeming quite irrational right now.
And some of it I wonder if, and I want to say this carefully because I want to always be positive, especially about real people. But I wonder if some of that isn't on the shoulders of the actress and not the writer.
It's very
because
possible.
I personally feel that I don't know if it's a character choice or if it's just an acting weakness, but it seems that there is ever only one expression on Eleanor Guthrie's face. And she doesn't have that same kind of nuance that we get from so many other characters that let us know that there's more going on behind the words that they're saying. I don't always get that with Eleanor, so I have to take her at face value. And at face value, she's a hot mess. Like, I have no idea what she's doing, why she's making these decisions.
Right.
And I do, while we're talking about Eleanor, I love her conversation with Vane because Vane, I think you said he really carries that scene.
Yeah.
Because, again, she just looks pissed and cranky with him through the whole thing. But he has this kind of, this longing and this tenderness. You can see that because he had that line. Like, he's, I might just forget that I loved you once. So it is. It's a threat. It's not even a very veiled threat, but it's also a reminder that you
and that is the moment that we know they have a backstory.
It is.
So we
actually
don't know
before that.
See that on some level before, because that's the last thing he says.
Yeah.
So we're actually seeing the depth of his conflicted feelings,
right,
before he tells us that this is because of a backstory.
Yeah, that is true.
So Zach McGowan.
Yeah, bad props. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's he's not very much in this episode, and yet he manages to really command.
Well, and what's so wonderful is that, like, he is painted very much as an adversary, a bad guy. Like, he's and it's interesting because obviously we're dealing with pirates here, so there's not like good guys, but we already have like a loyalty to Flint, and so we're already like Vane is bad.
Well, he did undermine an election by killing people.
He does. It's yes, but again, he has his agents do that, I suppose. Yeah, that is very true.
Oh, he definitely. I mean, for me, I was already loving my pirates. And
I just wonder, would Flint do any different? Is what I'm saying. But Flint is our guy, just because of storytelling. Flint is our guy.
Absolutely.
Therefore, Vane is the adversary.
Right.
So it's lovely as the season progresses to see how nuanced Vane is as a character and how much we get from him.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be. I mean, I feel like it's really fun to talk about it because on my first viewing, I didn't get most of that.
Oh.
And so it's really fun. I think I was just so in Flint's corner that,
what's so
that it was hard for me to see that. And I love now seeing that. So I think it's not something you need a second viewing to watch. I needed a second viewing to really get Vane.
Yeah, I was going to say, because me and my husband immediately were like, I like Vane. Right. I don't know why, but I like him.
Right. See, and I love him now.
And maybe it's because, like, you see Vane's thought processes. You see why he's making decisions. And even when it's for, reasons that you don't necessarily agree with or reasons that seem emotional, like Flint, we don't understand yet. He's such a mystery. For so long, he's such a mystery. But Vane is who Vane is.
Yes,
and you watch his character change and progress, but you never have any doubts about the decisions that he's making and the whys.
Mm-hmm. So true.
All right, we got to move on. Jack Rackom immediately jumped off the screen.
Okay.
Who is this guy, right?
Yeah,
he seems
clearly.
Like anachronistic in the show. He has this this crazy
hairdo.
Yeah. Well, he does. He seems like he should be at a punk rock concert in the 90s or the 80s. I don't even know when. I'm showing my age here.
Or late 70s glam, to be honest.
He's got this.
Yeah, he's got a little David Bowie going on. He's really, really right. You notice him from the first minute because you're like, who is this crazy guy?
He stands out as just being very, very different, a very different character.
Right. And so we're not yet getting all of the things that we will love to talk about Jack in future episodes because we don't have a lot of him. But there is this, we see that he is a schemer.
He's a schemer.
Because we see him figuring out what's going on in Flint's crew.
Yeah.
And figuring out the devious and kind of horrible way to deal with that.
Well, and he's very different in the way that he approaches things than Max and Silver, because we talked about how Max and Silver read the people and not the situation. Jack reads the situation. The people are just chess players, and he's just moving chess pieces, doesn't matter. But he sees the situation and the best means to an end.
Right. And then we have Anne Bonny, and again, these are historical pirates.
Is Jack Rackom historical too?
Jack Rackom.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
I knew Anne Bonny was.
Yeah, so they were actually historically a threesome. There was actually, I'm forgetting her name. Her name is Mary something. There was a third.
Wow.
So, yeah, a lot of people bring
Mary
this
Reed, right?
Yes. So, yes, Calico Jack Rackom is an actual...
Calico Jack.
Yep.
He hasn't got his nickname yet.
Not
now
yet.
I'm excited.
Right,
okay.
and he is actually historically the pirate that created the Jolly Roger. So this is...
Okay.
So
wow.
So people who know...
This show's so
right,
cool.
people who love pirate history will... see Jack and Anne and just be like, I know who these people are. I love the contrast that they did with them, that Jack is the schemer.
Yeah.
And a little fashionably bizarre. And then we have Anne, who's like mostly hidden, and there's no question what her job is. This woman is the enforcer.
Yes.
She just, you don't see her face until you see her swords.
Yeah.
And that's, we're going to have a long time of having a relationship with these two.
It takes a long time to get to know Anne, and I do regret that. And I'm sure again that it was purposeful by the writers. As an audience, to me, it felt like they just didn't know what they were doing with her.
And maybe they weren't sure what they were going to do with them.
Maybe they didn't know quite yet. But and maybe it's just because I've had this before as a writer. Maybe Jack just kept on stealing the show. Maybe he just kept on running away with the lines and with the dialogue, and we had to be like, okay, we have to make this woman that's his partner, especially since they have such a long and historic backstory. Like, we have to give her something. She has to be more if she's going to mean anything, or we're going to stop believing that she means anything to Jack. But Jack clearly is maybe the mind to Captain Vane's menace.
Well, and he is the quartermaster, so we have this.
That's right.
Same
He is the quartermaster.
We have this.
I had forgotten.
We have the same thing, and so that's going to be an interesting dynamic of how different quartermasters work against and with their captains.
Yeah. Wow,
so, and I feel like each quartermaster is paired properly with their captain.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a good point. Wow.
Okay, so that's, I think, I mean, let's talk about Scott a little bit. I love Scott.
Oh, sure.
We brought Scott up in relation to Eleanor, and I think we still don't know who Scott is exactly.
No.
We see him only in relation to Eleanor.
Right.
But I like the idea that he's like her conscience.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
okay.
He's trying to steer her in the correct directions, not necessarily morally, but the correct.
He's trying to protect her from herself.
Right.
I think.
Oh my God, that's exactly it. That is exactly what he's doing. He is trying to help Eleanor be her best self.
That's good.
So that's
and
pretty
he
much
is very likable. Like, as
Very
unlikable as
likable.
Eleanor is from the beginning, we like Scott. So
Oh,
it's
I
good
know.
that we were given Scott, or it'd be hard, I think, to
That's
care at all.
really
Because we're supposed to, I think, equate Eleanor with Nassau, like with what Nassau
Right.
wants to be. But for me, at least, that's hard to do in the first season. And it's really not until season 3 that I'm able to do that.
Oh, that's interesting. That's going to be an interesting conversation
It
with
will
the two
be.
of us then.
Yeah.
Through season 1. I'm looking forward to that then.
Yeah. Well, and I think it takes that long before we get real vulnerability from Eleanor.
Oh, that I
think,
agree.
And I think that the writers are trying to give us vulnerability. Like maybe her scene with Max, when we first see she and Max together, is supposed to show like where she needs a place to be soft.
Right.
But it doesn't work for me because Max says, basically, here, come to Max. Max is your harbor. So the second Eleanor starts to tell her troubles, Max is like, no, honey. No talking. I'm like, you just
I
said.
didn't think about
so
that.
now she doesn't have that place.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
So that was another reason where.
Oh, that would have been a nice opportunity to actually have them talk.
I completely agree. I think that had they used that scene to let Eleanor talk and express her vulnerability instead of just immediately shifting it to sex, because I suppose for some people, like, that act is making oneself vulnerable, but because it's Max's job.
Right.
And
we know that already.
And we know that. And because we know how smart Max is,
right.
we don't even know if we believe that
Right.
she's interested at this point,
Right,
because we know that she's conniving. We know that she uses her position and her sexuality to get the things that she needs. So if that's what they were trying to do with this scene, it was a miss for me.
Well, that totally makes sense, and that would have been great.
Yeah, had they actually had the conversation.
Right, whether or not Max was invested in the relationship emotionally, that would have been a great opportunity.
We needed to see the vulnerability of Eleanor.
That would have been good.
But here we are.
Yes.
As Gates says.
Right.
to Flint, and here we are.
Yes. So that's right. That's not something that happens, so we might as well not dwell on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can move, I think, into the big themes.
Ready your guns! Full complement!
Each of these things we're going to talk about now are themes that we're going to revisit in different episodes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's going to be really fun to track how these themes progress over time.
Yeah, and it really is remarkable that they laid so much of that groundwork here in the pilot episode. And because there's a lot of things, and even these themes that we'll bring up that are touched on, but you don't get that really big payoff until mid-season 2, season 3. So it's going to be a really interesting discussion. So what have we got first?
So the first one I want to talk about is something that we already touched on, which is the way that the pirates created their own image. And how useful and important that was to what they were trying to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we talked a little bit about that when we said when Flint's crew first boarded, they had like that crazy yell and they had all the stomping. Like we already knew that his reputation preceded him because they were talking about him and about the banner. But we got that great discussion there when the two captains were speaking, when Flint was talking to the captain who was lashed to the mast, and he said, "I don't have this thing. Call off your men." And there's this little moment of silence, and the captain says, "You can't, can you?"
And you can see in that captain's face where he's saying, damn, I just gave up my ship to this guy.
Yeah.
Based on this idea I have of how powerful he is, and maybe he isn't.
Yeah.
The other thing that we touched on that I just love, so I have to talk about it a little bit more, is the one pirate that we see that he has his face painted and his teeth in, and he's got these spiky, crazy teeth. And
right.
You don't know that those are fake teeth in the beginning. So you see him come in and he screams and he just looks so scary.
Yeah.
And that exact same pirate, after the credits, when you see Gates like inventorying and being very, very, very everyday workman about it, that exact same pirate jumps in front of him like a little kid.
Yeah.
To like
boo,
to,
right?
Right.
Doesn't he, like,
I don't know if he actually says boo, but it's like that's the intention.
That's the idea, right?
And I just love that. And when Gates says grow up, he laughs.
Yeah.
He takes out the teeth. And the taking out the teeth for me was really it. That was the moment where it was like, this is theater. They're doing theater of what it is to be a pirate, to be scary, because like now you think like they closed themselves in that room, like they cowered in fear.
Yeah, absolutely.
What remained of the merchant ship cowered in fear because of this reputation.
Yeah.
And so reputation is going to be something, and the building of reputation, what it takes to keep up a person's reputation of power.
Mm-hmm.
And this also ties in to Eleanor.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Because I mean, now I'm realizing,
right.
based on what we had already said, like she's trying to build an image of toughness, and I think this will tie into another part where we're going to talk about like who's really tough and who is trying to look tough, and even the ones who are really tough have to also create this theater of toughness.
Absolutely.
And what's
when
behind masks?
When we first see Vane, he's just smoking in the silence and saying nothing, and somebody else, the gentleman who was like the leader of the African slaves that had turned pirates on the ship, it's him who says, Captain Vane.
Right.
And that's all he says. And again, just the look on his face shows that this is also somebody whose reputation precedes him. I think it's also great that Silver creates his own identity in this same episode, because he's the one who says, I happen to be a very good cook, which he just pulled that right out. I mean, he's just trying to save his own skin.
Right.
But he's absolutely just creating an identity and ingratiating himself to this crew by their perception of him.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that you could, I really think that as a theme, you could even make it go a little deeper with it, to say the way people perceive you being more important than the truth. Yeah. Because we have, my favorite example of it in this episode is actually when we go to visit Richard Guthrie. Mm-hmm. And Flint has taken his arm, twisted it behind him. Guthrie's got his head on the desk facing Flint. And Flint says to Billy, put your pistol on this man's head. And we hear the gun cock, and he points it right at Flint.
Right.
And Flint looks at him. They meet eyes for a minute, but he knows Guthrie only heard the pistol cock.
Right.
He does not know where that gun is pointing, and that's more important. So that perception of what Guthrie thinks is happening in the moment, of who he thinks Flint is and who these two men are, is more important than the truth of the weakness of his position.
And the fact that Flint immediately, like there's a moment where he's upset with Billy, but then he immediately shakes that off, because he's the master of...
That's right.
And he's
still in control.
We will see this throughout, that Flint is 100% the master of creating and managing perception.
Yes, he certainly is.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's his gift, and it's really his job, like more than captaincy, is creating this image and maintaining this image. Yeah.
One of the aspects of perception and building a perception is storytelling. And this is a thing that, for me, I will always love. Whenever I am listening or watching to a story about people who respect the power of a story. Mm-hmm. That just, for me, that's just love at first sight.
Yeah. Well, and this show makes no bones about it either, because...
No, let me tell you a story.
Exactly.
About a Spaniard
it's repeated.
named
Let
Vasquez.
me tell you a story. Yes. That's absolutely right. And it's repeated a couple of times. I think... 2 times in this episode, and I think another is yet to come soon. Yeah. So I love this idea that the way that you weave your tale will, again, change whether you are loved or feared, change the way that you are remembered, change the way you can move forward. It's really fascinating stuff.
Well, and it's not just that the story is about people telling stories. It's, we will learn, and I don't feel like this is a spoiler to say this, but storytelling is power.
Yes.
And, well, I guess it isn't a spoiler at all, because this actually totally happens in this episode.
Absolutely.
So
the whole thing with the blank page, like, that was just a dramatic addition to a story he was telling. He invented this narrative. And, of course, he knew, I mean, the tale of the Urca de Lima was, of course, true. But when he had someone among you tore this page, tried to stir up disunity or discord among you, was all just part of this grand narrative. And then that great dramatic moment where he takes the page from his body and hands it shaking in his hand to Billy Bones.
That was a very dramatic moment.
It is amazing.
Yeah,
and Billy
another
just
type
like
of theater.
fighting with himself, trying to decide. But he too was moved by the story.
Well, I would argue that Billy, I mean, we watch, when we talked about this in Billy's story, like, we watch Billy go from someone who is not exactly against Flint, but certainly not for him. Like
right. Does not yet trust Flint.
Right. Yeah. Sees Flint as possibly the wrong direction.
Yes.
And Flint tells him stories. Mm-hmm. First, Flint tells me he's officially telling Richard, but he's really also telling Billy the story of the Spaniard named Vasquez.
Yeah.
And the Urca de Lima and what this could mean for everyone.
Right.
So he tells him that story.
Yeah.
And then he tells him the story in the boat.
Yes.
Before they get back to the Walrus.
You're right. Yeah.
And so he basically is using the storytelling to get Billy to the place that Flint needs Billy to be.
Yeah.
And and that is when, Flint basically turned Billy into his tool. No, that's not really the word I want. Although
it's awfully close. An instrument for sure.
Yes,
absolutely.
The instrument of his redemption.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's great too that we find as we go on how much Flint loves books. Yes. And we even get that in this episode because when
they laugh about it.
They do, yeah. And they're like, well, and sometimes, the captain will take certain books from different ships because he likes them or whatever.
Right. He says he does like his books.
He does like his books. Exactly. So that he understands what a good story will do and how it will change the way you think about things and how it can how you can stir up someone's emotions and make them think twice about something that they held to be true, or basically use it to manipulate people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing that we wanted to talk about was democracy in this time and place and world.
The politics of piracy.
And, just for a tiny bit of, background that most people know, this is 1715. Mm-hmm. Nassau was part of a colony of England, which was not a democracy. And there really wasn't a lot of democracy right then. And yet, pirates did have a version of democracy.
Absolutely. And it seemed very important to them. And again, when Billy laid out those rules for us, you saw just how much it affected their daily duties and their sense of identity. This idea, like he absolutely believed, we are all equals.
Right.
And it made that conversation with Flint there in the boat when Flint says, I am your king, so starkly in contrast with this idea of equality. And yet you could see the flicker of recognition. And of course, when Billy, does say it's the blank page, he realizes there are always leaders. There are always men who have the upper hand. And the best that you can do sometimes is to find the person that you can put your trust in and whose cause you believe is truest or is most just, or in this case, most lucrative.
Right.
And you've got to get behind somebody because that's the nature of humanity. I think that's the nature of people, is that there are always those who are going to be looking to lead, I suppose.
Right, but what's interesting in a pirate context, and this is actually, I haven't done a huge amount of history reading about it, but I do know that pirates did actually draft charters.
Wow. And
they actually elected their captains, unlike in the military world or with the merchant ships. So when Singleton's saying to the people he's trying to recruit, he's talking about their captain being a tyrant.
Yeah.
People were essentially taken off of the streets and out of their lives to be what they called pressed into service. And this was for the military and also for merchant ships that served the military.
Wow.
And they did not volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand exactly what time frame they had to serve once they did that, but it was essentially mandated servitude.
Wow.
So when he's saying that we understand that, and then basically the pirates are saying we're freeing you from that.
Yes.
You can leave this world where you are forced to do things for someone else and enter our world where you're doing it for yourself. And the whole show essentially is about this coming election.
Yes.
That Singleton is going to
attempt mutiny.
No, it's not mutiny. That's the thing. It's not mutiny because he's challenging Flint. He's calling for an election.
That's true.
And that's very
different. It's not
different.
mutiny. He's calling for an election.
Exactly.
You're absolutely right, to get the votes to unseat him as captain.
Right. It's because they work in a world where there is, again, it's a brutal democracy, and we get to see a lot of the brutality.
And it's very corrupt. Yeah, we saw how they're literally just buying votes.
Absolutely. Yep. But it is a democracy. And so the captains throughout the whole show, we are living with this tension that the captains have, that they can't just rule.
Yeah.
As much as Flint would like to.
Yes, that's right.
Flint wants to be king.
Well, and I love that because of that, we have the quartermasters are so fascinating to me, because I love it when they go toe to toe with the captains and they really argue their point. I love the relationship that we have between Flint and Gates. I love the conversation when Gates says, I don't know what's going to happen out there if you can't find something to say to these men. And Flint was like, what can I possibly say? They don't listen to me.
Right.
And he said, well, you got to find a way to make them listen.
Right.
And he has that moment where he thinks, okay, how do I win back the favor of these men? Yeah.
Exactly. So the captain he has this tension between what he's trying to do. I mean, this isn't just Flint, but in this case, in this episode, we're seeing Flint.
Yeah.
But Flint has this issue of what he's trying to do, but he has to bring the crew along with him.
Yes.
He really goes against that. Like, he does not like that, obviously. And he really wants Gates to just be his mouthpiece, but that's not actually the job of the quartermaster.
Right.
So they have this very intricate political system within the ships.
Yes. And I love to see it with Jack Rackom and Charles Vane, too, because their relationship is so different. But it's true that Rackom keeps Vane in check. And Vane is such a blunt instrument.
Right.
And
so we're going to get a lot more of that in the next episode, which is awesome and really fun to watch. And that's the main thing. I mean, I found this to be just an aspect of pirates that I didn't really think about a whole lot before this show. That,
you think of it being tyranny. You absolutely do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you think of it being tyranny, you think of it being, less human. I mean, this is one of the aspects of how they show us the pirates.
Make us monsters.
Right. And the fact that they have this system, that they have, these rules that everyone agrees on together, that they elect captains. There's something so personal about all of that instantly, again, like the monsters we saw before the credits, so quickly shift into people that we can relate to, even though they're pirates.
Yes. Absolutely.
That's the beginning of that theme. And again, the tension for captains between what they're trying to do and how they appease their crews, and when they actually have power. Like, sometimes if their crews aren't backing them, they are vulnerable.
Yes, absolutely.
And we see a lot of that. That's going to be a really fun thing to follow with the different characters over time. So, and now we'll move on to the really big theme, which is the theme, truly, I think, of Black Sails.
Yes.
In particular this season, but throughout the whole thing, which is the theme of civilization is coming. Mm-hmm. Our first introduction to that is actually when the Navy officer, I don't remember his rank.
Captain of the Scarborough,
right.
I think.
Yes. Right. He's the captain of the Scarborough, exactly, yes. Which is the sign. We see the Scarborough first thing.
Yes, yeah,
like right after they take the ship, those were the sails.
Absolutely.
That they saw with the
Of
Scarborough.
the British Navy, U.S. Navy, sorry. This was well before the U.S. Navy.
But I love what Hume says, like part of his little speech of intimidation to Richard Guthrie was to ask if you have gossip.
Yeah, he says gossip is what holds civilization together. It reinforces shame, and without shame, well, the world is a very dangerous place.
Wow. So we're really going to spend a lot of time talking about what is civilization, what are the pirates who we are led to believe, or we walk in believing are outside of what is civilization.
Right.
And how that line is a lot blurrier
than
we think it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for Flint in particular, especially as we move forward and we hear more of his backstory of how much this means to him, what makes men civilized and what makes society what makes it right. You know, who decides what is right and what is moral.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, shame is a really interesting concept. We don't talk a whole lot about shame in the show, but I feel like it's a good introduction.
Yes.
Because shame is about what society has considered to be right and wrong.
Yeah. Well, and in season 2, I think that's a big theme about shame.
Oh, that's true.
And yeah, but in this season, you're right. Yeah, it's mostly that idea of civilization and the politics of the monarchy. And he says, what about, like, that's the only thing that he can do to make his tax-paying citizens, you know, fear us, is to make us monsters.
Right. So yeah, I'm gonna actually. I feel compelled to read a little bit of what Flint said to Billy in that
please do,
because I love it so much.
It's so good. It really does give me chills.
Right, exactly. So basically, Billy is, you know, saying, "Well, it's just one boat. What's the big deal?"
Right.
And then Flint says this, which is in his new story, his other story. He says, "When the king brands us pirates, he doesn't mean to make us adversaries. He doesn't mean to make us criminals. He means to make us monsters." So that's like a story inside of a story as well, because he's telling Billy the story of the story that England is telling about them.
Right.
And yeah, exactly. And I really, really love that. And this is going to be like the conflict between what is truly civilized.
Yeah.
Again, just to bring back, like, we are talking about people who have a democracy, and you know, we live in a democracy-loving world.
Right.
So we already have that like we're talking about something that more resembles democracy versus monarchy.
The monarchy that they had. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
The monarchy that's trying to take them back into the monarchy. So there is that. And this idea of monsters, which again calls back to the beginning where we saw them as monsters.
Yes.
And then we saw that they aren't really.
Right. And I think
they
that's
can
where
do
he
monstrous
went.
things.
Yeah.
They are people who are capable of doing monstrous things.
Yes.
But they are people.
And I think that's why he wins Billy in that moment, because Billy says, I don't want to be seen as a monster. Absolutely. That's not the identity I've created for myself. And that's why he's going to stay under the banner of Captain Flint.
This he said right after the other thing. He said, "When I say there's a war coming, it isn't the Scarborough or King George. Civilization is coming, and it means to exterminate us." For me, that was like the height of chills. And I think, and then if you think back to Billy, like how his whole speech about everyone being equal, like Billy is a man of his crew. He believes in his crew. He believes in this community of the crew. And when Flint says exterminate us, he doesn't say exterminate me, Captain Flint. He says us. And I think Billy... Well, I don't. We'll see over time how much Billy Bones does not have a selfish bone in his body. I can't believe I just did that. But when Flint is framing this not as I'm trying to be your king,
right? I'm
not trying to be the pirate king or take this power for myself, but I'm trying to do it to save us.
Yes,
and that's when it speaks to Billy. That's the moment where Billy says, "Well, I have to follow this man because he might be able to save my community, my brothers."
Yes, his brothers. Yeah. And this family that he's created, his found family. Yeah, that's a great point. So if you enjoyed this analytical discussion about the program, please do share it with other people who love the show. We really do want to start building a community of people who really want to talk about the deep storytelling of this show. So by all means, join in. Thanks again. And until next week, from Common Room Radio, I'm Liz Stevens.
And I'm Daphne Olive.
Fathoms Deep is a Common Room Radio production. For more information and access to other programs, please visit us at commonroomradio.com. To show your support, pledges of as little as $1 a month can be made to patreon.com/commonroomradio. Join the conversation by using the hashtag Fathoms Deep and follow us on Twitter at BlackSalesCast. We ask that you keep your tweets respectful and positive, and please avoid spoilers. If you have more to say, we want to hear it in all its spoiler glory. Email us at podcast@commonroomradio.com with Fathoms Deep in the subject line. Thanks for listening.